how to estimate quantities of construction materials. So in this episode, we're going to be drilling a little bit deeper into what it's going to take to identify the quantities or the amount of materials that will be necessary in a construction estimate. So do you think estimating is tricky? How about running out of materials at the end of your project? Or what's even worse, having excess and too much and overspending money on materials for your project. These are just a few of the things that we're going to go through in this episode, teaching you how to estimate quantities for construction materials. Today we're going to start with just explaining how critically important it is for you to have accurate estimation in the quantities of materials for your project. First and foremost, we don't want to have too much material, and we don't want to have not enough. And so understanding how to identify these quantities is really important. Now, for those of you who don't have a lot of construction experience, leaning on a mentor is going to be really important. But this is one of the things that you can do as an early construction management student in knowing and understanding how to develop that foundational base for your estimate. When we're identifying calculations, first and foremost, we want to make sure that we're accurate on our takeoff from the drawings. So when we're looking at the drawings, we're looking at the extension and dimension lines, we're looking at the floor plan, we're determining how much space or area that we reference as square footage, and identifying what components are going to be necessary for this particular project. Are we placing the slab on grade, or are we going to be just installing the floor? So all of these are going to compute into the calculation of the materials that will be necessary to perform this work and how much we're going to need. Now, I would personally say that it's always better to err on the side of a little bit too much. But we don't want to have so much that we have to throw it away or that it's wasted. If it's a product like epoxy that we can use over and over on future projects, then that's not going to be wasted material unless we don't often do flooring, and then that epoxy has a time frame that it's viable and we would have to actually throw it or discard it away. And so I think that it's really important for us to understand the materials that we're using in these estimates and how that is going to apply to our calculation. Now, when we're looking at things that have, say, color in them, so a carpet that has color, or even tile that has color, when we purchase out of a lot, that lot is going to have a specific pattern or color to it that may not match future lots. And so when we're identifying our order and we want to be able to put our order in, the reason why you're trying to get as close to accurate as possible with maybe a 1% spare part overrun is that that gives us a little bit extra in case something breaks or we lose something, that we can still make sure that we have enough materials of the same lot and the same color to use for that particular project. Otherwise, you might end up having tile that is supposed to be the same tile, but actually has a different or darker shade to it and shows an obvious pattern in the completion or the aesthetics of the work. The same thing can happen with carpet, only with carpet, it doesn't have a good storage time frame. So often the back of the carpet becomes dry and hard and it's not as usable as it was when we first installed it. But a carpet can also have different dye colors or different threads that can end up changing the look of that carpet when we go to install it. When we're looking at quantities, it's very important that we keep track of what we're looking at. So I do like to use colored pencils for this. Guys sometimes believe that this creative mechanism doesn't suit their masculinity, but I'm telling you, you're going to have a lot of fun doing this. In understanding that these color coding tools are an option to really clear up whether or not you've already made that count or done that calculation. And so by being able to identify all windows and doors with orange means that when you finish that floor plan and it's colored all in orange for those specific items, that when you move to the electric plan and you're looking at it and say, I don't remember that door there, then you can go back to your floor plan and determine, oh, I did count that door. It's in orange, so I'm okay. One step further that I like to do is on the bottom corner of that page, I go ahead and write in the same color that I'm color marking my product in the number and identify 5 windows, 10 doors in that orange color. One other thing that is going to be critical for you is having an estimator journal. In that estimator journal, you can also have your color codes identified and marked in there. Now, there's only so many colors in the rainbow. So there may need to be symbols or different approaches that you make in order to work with whatever style you have in keeping track of organizing and managing how you're calculating the different components in a project and how you're coming up with those calculations. Now, I will tell you that there are many things that we calculate in an estimate that we're going to be able to use over and over. So for instance, the square footage of the floor plan is going to be used in the calculation for my slab on grade, for my epoxy, for my flooring, and so I'm not going to have to go back and recalculate that floor plan every single time. I just want to make a note in the corner of my drawings of the square footage of each of those rooms or that particular floor plan, and then I might also put something or a note of that in my estimator's journal. One of the things that I want you to keep in mind when identifying quantities for construction materials is that when you're working with suppliers and manufacturers, they're going to be the individuals that you're purchasing this material from. So they may have a specific industry term that they use when they're providing the calculation for their particular material. So I'll just use base rock as an example. If we're an estimator and we're calculating it and we can identify that it has a square cubic feet in understanding the base rock needed underneath a slab, when I go to order that from my supplier, it may need to be transitioned into tons or into yards in order for them to be able to let the trucking company know how much needs to be loaded. And so those different forms of measurement are also going to have different costs associated with them. So when you're talking to an entity, a supplier, a subcontractor, you need to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that you're talking about the same unit of measure when we're talking about estimating materials. Okay, well, if you think estimating is tricky, what we really need to insert in order to have a really good estimate is just a little bit of common sense. So if you think estimating is tricky, wait until you've made an estimate and then the numbers don't add up to the amount of material that you think that you need. And so this just means that you need to double check yourself, and whether you're double checking yourself or a teammate is coming in and rechecking your estimates, you know, it can get to that point where all of a sudden you've been looking at numbers and looking at drawings for so long that now you see stars. And so you might need just that third eye of somebody else coming in and checking your work. But it takes just a sliver of common sense in order to be able to know that you need tile for this bathroom. You have a good idea of the size of this bathroom, but the calculation that you came up with shows that this bathroom should be a lot bigger than what you think that it is. And so in that sliver of common sense, you're able to quickly identify if there's been an error made or if there is something else going on, like the technicality of the design requires a large amount of tile in order to be able to cut in what is necessary. So I know you can do it. Just use a little common sense. Accurate material estimation is key in being able to create a construction project that runs on time and on budget. So if you would like to learn more about how to become a construction estimator and how to be able to identify the quantities of material in your construction projects, then make sure to look for the link in the description for Construction Management Online.